Today we explore the sad and convoluted tale of Richard Engelbert, a wealthy real estate agent whose secret life and activities resulted in his violent death. Living in Littleton, Colorado, Richard Engelbert was 48 years old. Often seen cruising around in his elegant black BMW with the license plate sexy realtor, he was a well-known real estate agent in the area showing homes to customers. Richard married school principal Wendy and had a stepson called Harrison. Having earned a degree in business from the University of Colorado, he had spent more than 20 years working in real estate. Littleton people trusted Richard as he always seemed dependable and friendly. Richard had a big two-story house with a nicely maintained lawn. Many times, his neighbors would see him in the yard waving and smiling warmly to greet them. Often supporting local Little League teams and Sunday church attendance, he participated in community events and charitable fundraising. With a gorgeous house, a thriving business, and a loving family, Richard seemed to have the ideal existence. But Richard led a secret life. He had been sexually seeing his stepson Harrison for the past 2 years. Richard kept this relationship secret from everyone, worried it would damage his work and image. Apart from this, he kept seeing other guys for sex under cover of his employment, utilizing the houses he displayed as covert gathering spot. For Richard, these two lives generated a great deal of anxiety and conflict. Richard was working, negotiating transactions, and seeing clients in the days preceding his death. He frequently arrived home late and spent several hours at the office. Looking forward a weekend trip to the Bahamas with his wife Wendy, he was trying to unwind and temporarily forget about his problems. Richard also intended to catch up with old acquaintances and relax away from his busy life at a 4th of July cookout at a friend's house. Richard's buddies said he was charming and charismatic. He could make individuals feel significant and at ease. Richard had a nice facade, but his secret existence severely bothered him. His affair with Harrison and the falsehoods he used to keep it under wraps made him ashamed. He additionally worried about Wendy learning, since he thought it would ruin their marriage and his reputation in the society. Richard was under strain in his dying days trying to balance his public image with this inner conflict. His aspirations of a flawless existence were gradually disintegrating, producing a terrible and bloody conclusion. About 3:00 p.m., on June 27, 2014, Wendy Engelbert returned early from her principal's post at a school. She was looking forward a laid-back evening, perhaps catching up on her favorite book and maybe viewing some series on Netflix. Everything seemed regular at first when she strolled into their house's front door on Bleak Street in Littleton, Colorado. She yelled out for Richard from the kitchen counter, setting her keys there, but no response. A little nervous, Wendy went to investigate the basement where Richard frequently watched the History Channel or worked on his real estate documentation. She found it odd when she started down the stairs since the basement door seemed to be just ajar. She once more called his name, louder this time, but still no reaction. She arrived at the bottom of the stairs to find a horrific scene. Richard's dead body lay on the floor surrounded by evidence of a fierce struggle. Richard's face was assaulted and bruised. Bloodstains were on the carpet and furnishings. Clearly used to choke him to death, a men's luxury belt was securely around his neck. Shaking her husband and furiously trying to wake him, Wendy shouted in horror and ran to his side. However, it was too late. Startled and disbelieving, Wendy grabbed her cell phone and dialed 911. Her hands shook as she spoke to the operator. Her voice cracked with feeling. "My boyfriend passed away. He has, I believe, been murdered." She sobbed and battled to breathe. The operator tried to cool her down and told her to keep on the line till the cops showed up. Hearing the disturbance, Wendy's neighbor Luby Johnsongans came over to investigate. She came upon Wendy crying furiously on the front steps. As Wendy waited for the police, Luby stayed with her trying to calm her. The minutes seemed like hours, as Wendy's head whirled with questions about who might have done this and why. When the cops did show up, they swiftly locked the area and walked Wendy and Luby out from the basement. Wendy was shocked and not sure she understood what had just transpired. She insisted on asking, who would treat Richard this way? Her mind unable to handle the horrific reality of her husband's death. Again and over again, the finding of Richard's body rocked the peaceful Littleton town. News of the murder traveled fast, neighbors and friends gathering outside the Engelbert house to try to understand the catastrophe that had rocked their apparently ideal community. Wendy Engelbert called the Littleton Police Department urgently on June 27, 2014, at 3:15 p.m., arriving at the site in minutes. Police, under the direction of seasoned investigator Detective James Cattle, noted for his exacting methodology. On the peaceful Oak Street, the Engelbert house was rapidly encircled by police cars, and yellow crime scene tape was laid all around. Entering the basement, Detective Cattle and his colleagues found a horrific scene. Richard Engelbert lay on the ground, his men's luxury belt securely around his neck. The carpet and adjacent furnishings showed bloodstains suggesting a violent battle. With a steely resolve, Detective Cattle, a spry man in his late 40s with sharp eyes and a cool head, took in the situation. The cops started their inquiry, gathering proof. From several points of view, they captured every element in the picture. Carefully packaged as evidence, the belt used in the murder was inspected for fingerprints and any other hint pointing to the culprit. Richard had struggled for his life, according to Detective Cattle's observations of the overturned furniture and evidence of fight. Arriving to handle the scene, forensic professionals used luminol to identify blood trails and gathered samples for DNA testing. For hair, fibers, and any other possible evidence, they painstakingly quieted the space. Even the most seasoned police were startled by the violence of the murder. They stayed concentrated on compiling all the available information. Detective Cattle spoke with Wendy Engelbert, still in shock at learning her husband had died. She related her day and the terrible moment she came upon Richard. Though she said she had no idea who may have done this, her story was emotive and thorough. Wendy had been at work at the time of the murder, hence her alibi was rapidly confirmed. The cops started then walking the area. They talked with neighbors, including Luby Johnson-Gantz, who had helped Wendy. Hey true crime solvers, interested in more real-life murder mysteries, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. And do you have any thoughts about this case? Or have a case of your own you'd like us to investigate? Leave us a comment. Stay safe, true crime. The unrevealed stories. Sarah said she heard Wendy scream and discovered her on the front steps looking confused and disoriented. Other neighbors noted seeing Richard earlier in the day, but nothing looked unusual. Seeking any leads, the police also examined Richard's most recent phone and email data. Richard had been seeing other individuals for illegal sex, according to multiple dubious messages and calls they found. This disclosure gave the research fresh direction and indicated possible reasons connected to Richard's secret life. Determined to identify the man guilty for Richard Engelbert's horrific murder, the police carried on their investigation as the day descended into evening. Once the area was cleared, Detective Cattle and his colleagues examined the gathered material in order to get ready for their next phase of inquiry. Littleton's residents watched nervously, yearning justice and answers for Richard Engelbert. Richard Engelbert's murder first claimed Wendy Engelbert, his wife. Respected Littleton School principal Wendy, 47, was intelligent and driven by nature. Having spent more than 15 years working for the school system, she was quite active in community events. Her associates said she was committed, strong, always aiming for greatness. On June 28, 2014, Wendy was taken in under inquiry following the murder. Leading the questioning, Detective James Cattle sought to fit her behavior and feelings together. Though Wendy seemed tired and upset, she answered inquiries coolly. She related her working day and the terrible finding of Richard's body when she got home. Wendy's wrath and uncertainty were clear even with her calm manner. She insisted she had no notion Richard was sexually engaged with other men and voiced shock and irritation over the affair. The disclosure of the affair heightened the suspense of the questioning as Detective Cattle dug further into Wendy's emotions about her husband's treachery. Detective Cattle inquired of Wendy on her relationship with Richard. She said they had a great relationship but noted they had just experienced some difficulties. Wendy said she had no idea Richard had a secret life. She said she had lately suffered from a ski injury, which had made it difficult for her to read people's behavior, and speculated this would be the reason she missed any evidence of Richard's secret existence. The alibi Wendy had was strong. Attending meetings and getting ready for the next academic year, she had spent all day at the institution. Security video and colleagues verified her attendance at her place of employment during the murder. Still, her relationship to the victim qualified her as a person of interest. Detective Cattle looked at Wendy's motivations as well. For her, reputation and career were absolutely vital. Richard's romance jeopardized both. But Wendy insisted on her innocence throughout the interrogation, vehemently refuting any participation in the crime. She was obliging and supplied all asked information, including email and phone access. Searching the Engelbert house carefully, the police sought for any proof connecting Wendy to the crime. They came back empty-handed, therefore supporting her alibi and words. Still, the detectives stayed wary since emotions may inspire even the most logical people to behave desperately. After several hours of interrogation, Wendy was let go, but she stayed under observation as the inquiry progressed. While they investigated other leads, the cops watched her closely and tracked her activities and contacts. Richard Engelbert's murder was proving to be a difficult case with layers of motives and secrets gradually breaking apart. The next accused was Richard's 21-year-old stepson, Harrison Engelbert. Harrison, a part-time bartender and college student, had a rough past. As a teen, he had gone in and out of rehab and 12-step programs. Harrison was driven to turn his life around despite these obstacles, and was working toward a psychology degree at a nearby community college. Harrison was hauled in for questioning on June 28, 2014. Knowing Harrison's relationship with Richard was delicate, Detective James Cavell approached the questioning carefully. Harrison seemed anxious but obliging, ready to tell his side of the tale. Harrison told the police he had been in a covert 2-year sexual connection with his stepfather. He talked of being torn, battling the dishonesty and silence. Harrison said he had recently ended the affair after learning Richard had been seeing dozens of other men at properties he showed as a real estate agent as a covert meeting spot. Harrison revealed a mix of sadness and rage during the questioning. Richard's falsehoods and manipulation let him feel deceived not just about the affair but also about other aspects. Harrison maintained, despite his bitterness, he had no intention of hurting Richard. Several witnesses verified his alibi when he said he had been bartender on the night the murder took place. Detective Cattle dug closer to Harrison's likely motivations. Though the young man's past of emotional upheaval and drug use begged questions, his recent attempts to remain sober and concentration on his studies presented a different picture. Harrison candid about his challenges and his wish to go forward away from the poisonous relationship with Richard. Looking for any proof of Harrison's involvement in the crime, the police also looked over his computer gadgets and social media profiles. Though nothing specifically linked him to the murder, they discovered messages between him and Richard displaying disagreement and stress. Although Harrison's DNA was discovered at the crime site, this was not surprising given he lived in the house. Harrison's cooperation and persistent alibi made it challenging for the cops to place the crime on him. After many hours of interrogation, he was let go, but he stayed a major player in the inquiry. The cops kept observing his behavior and contacts in search of any discrepancies or fresh data that would clarify his involvement. The complicated dynamics between Richard and Harrison complicated the matter and left Detective Cattle and his staff with more questions than answers. Deeper still, they wanted to find the truth behind Richard Engelbert's savage murder. The third suspect investigated was 30-year-old Alexa Hernandez. Alexa was a person of interest since she had a past with Richard Engelbert. Her marriage ended after she once found Richard having sex with her husband in the house they were touring together's bathroom. Renowned for her explosive temper, Alexa had more run-ins with Richard following the event. Detective James Cattle called Alexa in for questions on June 29, 2014. Alexa worked as a server in a well-known neighborhood cafe and was known for her candor and strong will. She entered the interrogation room looking defiant, prepared to defend herself. Detective Cattle began by inquiring of Alexa about her relationship with Richard. She said she hated him for destroying her marriage and bringing her great emotional suffering. Alexa said that her worst day of life was the one she found her husband and Richard together. Richard had always brushed her off when she had confronted him several times following that, demanding apologies and explanations. Alexa replied she had been working a double shift at a diner called Denny's, when asked where she had been on the day of the murder. She gave the names of her colleagues able to confirm her alibi. Detective Cattle confirmed Alexa had been at work all day when he called the diner and spoke with Alexa's manager. Several co-workers also verified seeing her during her shifts. Detective Cattle looked at Alexa's possible intentions even with her strong alibi. She clearly felt great resentment toward Richard, but she maintained she had moved on and was concentrating on reconstructing her life. Alexa said she had enrolled in night studies at a nearby community college, aiming to work as a social worker and assist others who had gone through same experiences. Searching Alexa's house and car, the cops sought any evidence linking her to the crime. There was nothing strange or damning they discovered. The phone records and social media activities of Alexa revealed no interaction with Richard in the weeks preceding the murder. Alexa seemed calm and collected during the questioning, although clearly despising Richard. She showed no evidence of dishonesty or guilt and answered all questions straightforwardly. Although Detective Cattle observed her honesty and cooperation, she understood they had to leave all alternatives open. Alexa was let go many hours of interrogation. Knowing her background with Richard made her a possible suspect. The police kept an eye on her. Her alibi and lack of proof, however, complicate direct linking her to the crime. Every interview added complexity to the inquiry into Richard Engelbert's murder. Determined to find the truth, Detective Cattle and his colleagues, the web of lies and secrets encircling Richard's life made their work ever difficult. They persisted, searching for the bit of evidence that might at last identify the killer. The probe veered dramatically on July 3, 2014. Littleton, Colorado, was having a steamy summer day with highs in the upper 80s. Detective James Cattle got a call from the forensic lab about 10 o'clock a.m. Reviewing objects from the crime site, they had discovered vital fresh evidence. Among Richard Engelbert's possessions was a little covert camera meant to be a smoke detector set in the basement. Detective Cattle and associates grabbed the video right away. For the preceding few weeks, the camera had captured the events in the basement, including Richard's covert meetings and contacts. Reviewing the video, they came onto a clip from the murder day. Richard and his stepson, Harrison Engelbert, were shown in the video engaged in a furious dispute. The dispute turned rapidly into a physical fight. Harrison choked Richard in a fit of wrath in the video, grabbing the luxury belt from a nearby chair. Unquestionably, the video showed Harrison's participation in the murder. Caught the whole occurrence. The team was astounded by the violence and obvious intent behind the act. Angry and betrayed behavior. Detective Cattle got in touch with Harrison and invited him to come in for more questions using this fresh information. Unaware of the video proof against him, Harrison showed up at the station. Cattle showed him the video during the questioning. The way Harrison behaved altered right away. His first quiet evolved into dread and desperation. Harrison burst down and admitted he had been caught. He said he felt imprisoned in the relationship with Richard, under control by his mother Wendy and his stepfather. Constant dishonesty and Richard's adultery had driven him to his breaking point. Harrison said he had killed Richard to release himself from the stifling circumstances during a flash of unbridled anger. Detective Cattle made sure every element of Harrison's confession was captured by meticulous documentation. Together with the confession, the fresh data clearly established Harrison's guilt. The police now clearly understood the events preceding Richard Engelbert's murder, as well as the convoluted network of lies and secrets around the case. Just before lunch on July 4, 2014, the Littleton Police Department moved decisively. Detective James Cattle and his staff were ready to arrest Harrison Engelbert for the murder of Richard Engelbert with his confession and the damning video evidence. Living a life of upheaval and uncertainty, Harrison, 21, a college student and part-time bartender, had been the great emotional burden from his affair with his mother's manipulations, and his unhappy history had drove him to a breaking point even if he was trying to overcome them. Overwhelmed by emotions of betrayal and manipulation, Harrison had slain Richard in a flash of wrath, the police discovered. Detective Cattle and some other cops showed up at Harrison's residence on the day of the arrest. When they knocked on the door, Harrison replied looking pale and worn out. Read his rights while under handcuffs. Harrison showed no feeling as he was driven to the police car and seemed to be accepting of his fate. Though the area was peaceful, few inquisitive observers saw the scenario play out. Harrison formally was charged with Richard Engelbert's murder back at the station. Detective Cattle did a last interrogation to record every element of Harrison's confession. Harrison underlined once more his sense of being imprisoned and controlled by Richard and under pressure from his mother Wendy. He detailed the incidents before the murder, including the angry disagreement that had turned into the lethal attack. Also hauled in for interrogation was Richard's wife, Wendy Engelbert, mother of Harrison. According to the inquiry, Wendy had pushed Harrison to keep the affair going even knowing about it for months. Her chances in the forthcoming race for school superintendent would be destroyed by Richard's careless sexual behavior, she worried. Wendy, though, had no direct part in the murder. Although her lying and manipulation complicated the matter, she was not accused of any crimes. The discoveries startled Richard's relatives. Unaware of Richard's dual life, they had seen him as a loving husband and father. Harrison's imprisonment generated a range of feelings, including grief for Richard's death, resentment at the treachery, and a sad inevitability given the situation. The news astounded the Littleton community. The murder had rocked the community to its very foundation by revealing a secret society of lies and secrets. The Engelbert family and the whole town struggled to process the startling events that had transpired as Harrison awaited trial. Although the case had been closed by the police, the emotional fallout would last for a protracted period. The facts regarding Richard's life and death had come to light, but the wounds left behind would take far more time to heal. August 15, 2014 saw Harrison Engelbert's trial start in Littleton, Colorado. Family, relatives, and local media abound in the courtroom as curious listeners sought the specifics of the case. Drawing attention from local as well as national news sources, the trial was a major event in the town. District Attorney Laura Mitchell, 45-year-old noted for her keen courtroom presence and commitment to justice, headed the prosecution. She maintained that Harrison's killing of Richard Engelbert was planned and motivated by intense betrayal and resentment. Key evidence she offered was Harrison's confession and the concealed camera footage. Mitchell underlined that Harrison's actions sprang from a turbulent and unstable relationship, but finally he was in charge of the cruel killing of his stepfather. Non-binary advocate Z. Barnes, a 40-year-old attorney with a track record of fighting well-publicized cases, defended the defense. Barnes claimed that both Richard's mother Wendy and Harrison's behavior reflected great emotional conflict and manipulation. They said Harrison's unstable mental state and the pressure he was under made it challenging for him to regulate his behavior. In light of the situation, Barnes asked for a guilty judgment but with regard for a lesser charge, so seeking a more mild penalty. The victim's family, including Wendy Engelbert and other relatives, sat silently throughout the trial, clearly unhappy about the procedures. The disclosures of Richard's second life and the upheaval it had generated had startled them. Listening to the specifics of the affair and the murder, one could sense their emotional responses. September 5, 2014 saw the jury return with a decision. Harrison Engelbert came out clean on second-degree murder. The jury decided that although Harrison had acted in a fit of wrath, the killing was not premeditated. The choice elicited conflicting opinions. Given the psychological and emotional elements at hand, several felt the decision was fair. Given the savagery of the act, others felt it was overly forgiving. Harrison was given a 25-year jail sentence without chance of release. Although the sentence closed the matter, Richard's family would still suffer much from trauma and loss. Knowing that someone so close to Richard had brought about his death, the Engelbert family battled to find peace. The trial had influence outside of the courtroom. It left a lasting impression on Littleton by forcing the town to face the latent facts of deception and treachery. The Engelbert family and Littleton town started the challenging process of recovering from the horrific events that had transpired as the case came to close. Following the September 2014 Harrison Engelbert trial, Littleton, Colorado, gradually started to get back to normal, but the case stayed with us. Deeply disturbed by the horrific murder of Richard Engelbert and the following disclosures, the community had a protracted healing and adjustment period. Still serving a 25-year prison sentence, Harrison Engelbert stayed in the Colorado Department of Corrections. Dealing with his own emotions and the fallout from his acts, His life behind bars reflected the same challenges he encountered outside. Harrison was apparently calm and reserved in prison, concentrating on finishing his degree through offered courses. He used the time to go back over prior choices and get emotional issue counseling. Richard's wife, Wendy Engelbert, faced difficulties of her own. Her personal and professional life suffered much as the trial revealed her knowledge of Richard's affair and her manipulative behavior. She had been tirelessly pushing for her candidacy for school superintendent. Hence, the controversy compromised that. Though she had earlier tried to project a flawless picture, the disclosures caused her to withdraw from the contest. Seeking therapy to manage the emotional damage and to repair her reputation, Wendy sought to reconstruct her life away from public view. Littleton started to move ahead in the months following the trial. However, the case left scars. To honor Richard Engelbert's memory and assist those impacted by the tragedy, the community organized memorials and supporting events. The tragedy of the Engelbert family acted as a somber reminder of the secret battles hiding behind closed doors. The case stayed a moving chapter in Littleton's history, a reminder of the great effects of violence and treachery on people and communities both, even after life returned to normal. The murder of Richard Engelbert serves as a sobering reminder of the complexity and secrets that could lie under the surface of apparently ideal life. This is a story of manipulation, dishonesty, and the terrible results of leading two lives. Thank you for joining us on this episode of True Crime. The Unrevealed Stories. Stay tuned for more stories that delve into the darkest corners of human nature.